Keir Starmer rearranges the shadow cabinet after election drubbing.
Well, Mr. Starmer, any news on the reshuffle? It makes you more electable.
Amid recriminations over Labour's election performance, there's criticism too for his handling of the reshuffle. It's a question of when, not if, Nicola Sturgeon's message to Boris Johnson on another independence referendum. On track with the roadmap, the government to confirm we can eat out inside again in the next stage of unlocking. And celebrations on hold for City as Manchester United make them wait for Premier League glory.
This is ITV News with Romilly Weeks.
Good evening. If Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet reshuffle tonight was intended to show he was in control after Labour's poor election performance, it was a faltering effort. After a day of delays, it was also pretty limited. Out goes Annalise Dodds as shadow chancellor, as does the party's chief whip. Two of only a handful of moves. As for Angela Rayner, whose demotion started all this, she has a significant new job. Our political reporter Shihab Khan has all the details.
After a difficult few days, the Labour leader has taken some swift and somewhat surprising action.
Any news on the reshuffle? It makes you more electable.
Reshuffling his top team in the hope it addresses the disappointing set of election results. This morning he was under pressure after news that he decided that Angela Rayner, his deputy, would have some key roles taken off her. Some within the party were far from happy about it.
It was very foolish to sack Angie Rayner. First of all, she didn't take any of the big decisions in relation to Hartlepool, and nowhere in the country are anybody saying we didn't vote Labour because of Angela Rayner.
It is part of a wider reshuffle. Rayner will now be shadowing Michael Gove in the Cabinet Office. She'll be replaced as party chair by Annalise Dodds, who's been demoted from shadow chancellor. Rachel Reeves has been promoted to replace her, and Nick Brown, the party's chief whip, has been sacked. It is places like here in Dudley that Labour needs to win over voters. They lost 11 councillors here, but what do people make of the party's response to the election results?
Makes absolutely no difference whether they reshuffle. I think the Labour leader is more of a guy with a silver spoon in his mouth.
If they had a reshuffle and they had a different cabinet who had a strong, message, pinpoint, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, then maybe I may change my mind.
But there was some good news for Labour today. Tracy Brabin was elected the first mayor of West Yorkshire. And as she celebrated the historic moment, she didn't want to be bogged down with discussions about the reshuffle.
Obviously, after any election round, there's going to be changes. People are moved around. We've lots of talent in the Labour Party who definitely have, deserve outings on the front bench and so on. But to be honest, that's not my priority. I'm just so delighted to be the first ever woman Metro Mayor in the country.
Her victory means she will have to step down as the MP for Batley and Spen. It's a marginal seat and it means another tricky by-election is on the way for Labour, which they'll be desperate to win. Shihab Khan, ITV News.
Well, Boris Johnson had a tricky phone call of his own today too with Nicola Sturgeon. She had a pretty clear message telling him it is not a case of if there'll be another independence referendum in Scotland, it is when. From Edinburgh, our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith reports.
Nicola Sturgeon resumed her place in the First Minister's official residence today. Having won the election, she says the pandemic is her first priority, but with almost half of Scotland backing her party, she's gone straight to work trying to win the argument for another referendum.
The SNP won the election on offering people a referendum after the COVID crisis to determine the issue of independence. It strikes me that saying that people in Scotland are split on the issue is actually an argument for settling it in a referendum, not an argument against.
To get that independence referendum, the Scottish Parliament must first vote for it. But with the SNP and Greens forming a majority in favour here, that will be a formality. Then the First Minister will write to the Prime Minister requesting the powers to give Scots that democratic choice. Scotland's First Minister has now spoken directly with the UK Prime Minister for the first time since these elections. Her spokesperson says that in that call, she made it clear she believes Scotland having another independence referendum is no longer a matter of if, it's now just a matter of when. There is a glimmer of agreement in that from the UK government, telling me today their objection is also based on timing.
Are you saying never or are you saying not now?
Oh, not now. No, I think that
not never.
No, well, obviously, it is the case that there is an understandable debate that people can have in the future, but for the moment, we absolutely need to concentrate on recovery.
In your mind, what would be the time frame for having that debate sensibly?
Well, I'm not concentrating on that at the moment. I mean, I'm not putting it into my mind at all.
People in Scotland are thinking about it. You understand
well,
that?
Journalists in Scotland are asking about it.
Nicola Sturgeon will soon be asking about it. First Minister, when is the time? But she knows Scotland is still split down the middle.
Those who favour staying in the Union don't want a second referendum at all. Those who are pro-independence in the main do want one in the next parliamentary term, but once the immediate crisis of COVID is over. But of course none of this is settled.
Neither the First Minister nor the Prime Minister is rushing to a referendum. They both fear they could lose. But the campaign for Scotland's future has already begun. Peter Smith, ITV News, Edinburgh.
The Conservative candidate for Police and Crime Commissioner in Wiltshire has tonight withdrawn, admitting he had a prior conviction that made him ineligible. Votes were meant to be counted tomorrow. Our correspondent Rupert Evelyn has been following the story. Rupert, this is all pretty extraordinary.
It is indeed. Rules to become a police and crime commissioner say that you cannot do it if you've ever been convicted of an imprisonable offence. Now, we've learned today that Jonathan Seed, the Conservative candidate in Wiltshire, had a drink driving conviction 30 years ago. Now, that means that it essentially bars him from becoming a PCC. We had sources who came to us a few weeks ago and said that there was something in Mr. Seed's history that would prevent him from standing. We put that to Mr. Seed and we put it to the Conservative Party. We got no response. So 8 days before polling day, we tracked down Mr. Seed.
It's a simple yes or no.
I just simply won't engage with you. I don't need to engage with you.
We never got a response to that question about a conviction. The question, of course, now is who knew what and when. And if Mr. Seed wins the highest number of votes, he won't be allowed to stand. So maybe there will be another election in Wiltshire.
Thank you very much for that, Rupert. There have been fresh clashes in Jerusalem this evening between Palestinians and Israeli police. Tensions there have been rising in recent days over the possible eviction of several Palestinian families from homes on land claimed by Jewish settlers in a neighbourhood of Jerusalem's Old City. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister will confirm the next stage of lockdown easing will take place in a week's time. It means pubs and restaurants in England can serve inside, with families meeting indoors once again. But the significant relaxation of restrictions puts more pressure on the COVID contact tracing system. With that in mind, a trial aimed at replacing self-isolation for COVID case contacts with daily testing began today, as Rebecca Barry explains.
Sometimes you're tearing your hair out, I want to go for a run and see my friends and family.
A video diary from isolation.
Hello, just walking around the perimeter of my house, living the dream, getting some of that nice fresh air. We're not allowed out, so we try and get our exercise by doing this.
Finn's been isolating for the last week after one of his housemates tested positive for COVID. This is the third time he's had to do this, so news that quarantine could eventually be replaced by daily testing if a major study is successful sounds very appealing.
I would 100% want to take that opportunity. If you can crack on with your life and know that you're not making the problem worse, then I think I would certainly take that opportunity with both hands.
From today, if you've had close contact with a positive COVID case, you could be invited to take part in a study. Participants will get 2 PCR tests plus a week's supply of these rapid tests. They'll be able to go about their lives exempt from the legal requirement to quarantine so long as they take one of these tests every morning, the results are negative and they don't show any symptoms. Those taking part must be over 18 and not in full-time education. Anyone not in the trial should stick to the current rules. The scientist leading the study says it could help us return to a kind of normality.
To help us reduce the need to isolate so that we can all return to greater normality as quickly as possible, but to do so in a safe manner.
Tomorrow, the government's set to confirm a further easing of the rules in England, with hints that hugging could soon be allowed. As the risk declines and social mixing increases, this research could help carve out an alternative strategy for living with COVID. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Manchester City will have to wait a little longer to be crowned Premier League champions. After slipping up against Chelsea yesterday, they needed Manchester rivals United to lose at Aston Villa today. But United didn't play ball. Chris Scudder was watching.
If City are almost home and hosed, United still wanted to rain on their parade for a little while longer. Had they lost here, it would have been all over. But Villa threatened to do just that with a great strike.
Bertrand Traoré has them unwrapping the bunting in the blue half of Manchester.
Villa, though, hadn't beaten United at home for nearly a quarter of a century, in the days when City were heading towards English football's third tier.
Fernandes!
And once they were level through Fernandes' penalty, United made Villa pay and City wait, with a second goal from Mason Greenwood.
And it's quite the turnaround from Manchester United.
Not what the noisy neighbours wanted, and United scored a third through Cavani to silence the City celebrations a little while longer.
Here's Watkins, Henderson was wrapped.
Villa finished the match with 10 men when Watkins was booked for a dive and 2 yellow cards made a red. United are still a distant 10 points behind City at the top, but they'll hope to keep them waiting even longer by beating Leicester on Tuesday. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
Meanwhile, the Women's Super League has been decided and Chelsea are celebrating tonight after a 5-0 thrashing of Reading. That means they retain their title, finishing 2 points clear of Manchester City. It's Chelsea's 4th title, making them the most successful club in the Super League era. And they'll hope to be celebrating again next Sunday when they take on Barcelona in the final of the Champions League in Gothenburg. And that is all for tonight. The national weather is coming up next. But from me and everyone on the Weekend team, have a very good night.